The Susan Brender Show is a radio show online broadcasted on YouTube across the United States and globally. The show features guests who speak about health, spirituality, entertainment, and a host of subjects to enlighten people across the nation. Listen to the show that empowers women and men alike and highlights those who have made a difference.
I'm Susan Brender, and this is the Susan Brender Show, and I have an old friend on the show, and his name is Michael Solomon, known as the Motivator. Michael is a former NYPD Special Investigator and bestselling author. Michael Solomon, during his tenure in the Intelligence Division, he was assigned to protect the Shah of Iran and Madam Chang of Taiwan. He has personally met 4 U.S. presidents. Michael Solomon's newest book is called The Allegory, and I want him to talk about the allegory.
Susan, hi. It's glad to be with you again.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, as you know.
Oh, thank you. It's always a pleasure being with you. It's a great show. What can I tell you about the book? Well, the title being Allegory, How One Man's Lies, Deceit, Arrogance, and Greed Has Gaslighted the World, is starting to come true as people are starting to open up their eyes. What people don't realize is the way I got the title of the book is the definition of allegory as a noun is a study, poem, or picture that can be interpreted to reveal a hidden meaning, typically a political or a moral one. It's usually a falsehood. And that's from the Oxford English Dictionary. Of course, a synonym for allegory is a tale, which is described as fictitious or a narrative or a story. Well, if allegory doesn't sound like Al Gore, I don't know what does. And the only letter that's in the word allegory that's not in his name is Y. And the question in my book is why Al? And it describes everything the man has done since 1990. And he's been on a soapbox with climate change. And there isn't a prediction he's made in the last 40 years that has even come true. Nothing.
Nothing.
So it's amazing.
Let me say to you, you're not afraid to name names. You say that the Vice President, Al Gore, has become the poster child for the biggest scam in the history of the world. Why would he do this? And how did other scientists come up into agreement on that this is a scam? Tell us about this and let our audience know more about it.
Well, let me give you it this way. The opening quote in my book is by Philip Handler. Handler was an American biochemist. He was the president of the United States National Academy of Sciences, and he's a recipient of the National Medal of Science. The quote in my book is, "Science best serves public policy by living within the ethics of science and not those of politics. If the scientific community will not unfrock the charlatans, the public will not discern the difference. Science and the nation will suffer." That is precisely what has happened and is what's continuing to happen because the world leaders are constantly being gaslighted by Al Gore and his proponents. The reason is because none of what they have been saying is attributed to science as we know it. Gore's pronouncements are based on consensus and conjecture, not empirical science. Had he studied natural science and not science fiction, maybe we wouldn't be in this today as a green energy predicament. It's amazing. In an interview some years ago, Gore stated that if you don't believe in global warming, read Michael Crichton's book, State of Fear. Did he forget that Crichton's book was fiction? It's amazing. Crichton said that, I'm quoting Crichton, before he passed away, he told Gore to stop quoting his book. It's fiction. Gore came back and said, "But you have all these footnotes in there." And Crichton says they're not real. They're to make it look real, but they're not real. None of those footnotes are actual. It's just something I made up. You don't understand. The book is fiction. And he has taken that and he has gaslighted the leaders of the free world with the help of the Norwegian Nobel Committee into believing that within 11 years, life on this planet, which we cherish so much, will be destroyed beyond repair. It's amazing. It is totally conjecture. He said that in 1993 and continually repeats it. He keeps saying that every 10 years, for the next 30 years, nothing has changed. It's amazing. Not a single prediction that Al Gore of any of his proponents have made since 1993 has ever come true.
Michael, you have a quote in your book description. Let me read it. This book is not designed to change your mind. It's only meant to have an open mind and discover the truth to decide for yourself what you want to believe, but decide before the government takes away your money and your freedom. Can you explain why you wrote that? And what do you mean before the government takes away your money and your freedom?
Well, the government has just passed a bill spending $900 billion of our tax money to fight something we can't fight, to buy green, to go with green energy and everything else, which just cannot be accomplished. It's impossible. We can't change the climate. There is a difference between climate and weather. Every time there is a storm that's out of the ordinary, everybody keeps screaming, oh my God, the climate's changing. It's climate change. It's climate change. It's not climate change. January 1977, we had 2.5 inches of snow in Miami. It's the only time it snowed in Miami in the last 50 years. If that was today, they'd be screaming, it's climate change, it's global warming. No, it's not. It's a weather anomaly. The reason we have more tornadoes today, we don't have any more tornadoes than we did 100 years ago. We have better predicting of it. We can predict the storms better today than we could have years ago. The technology is so much different today. We predict today. You go on the radio and they tell you there's a hurricane that's going to hit Florida, and it's starting right now. It's off the coast of Africa. My God, that's 6,000 miles away. You may never even get here, but everybody's jumping on it, screaming it's climate change. You know, it's just amazing. It's absolutely amazing. The work of science has nothing to do with consensus. Consensus is a business of politics. And politics, the only thing they like to do in politics is spend our money. You realize that right now the debt in the United States is $96,000 for every human being living here? It's frightening.
It sounds frightening. Michael, you mentioned the word gaslighting also in your description. Explain to our audience what that means and how that applies to climate change.
Well, gaslighting is, you just keep repeating something over and over and over again, and people start believing it. It's frightening the way it is. Psychologists use the term gaslighting to refer to a specific type of manipulation, and where the manipulator is trying to get something else or a group of people to question their reality, and that's exactly what's happening. It's exactly what happens. The reality and perceptions are totally miscued because we keep hearing the same words over and over again, and there's nothing we can do about it.
I understand.
It's frightening. And Gore is just running around the world making all these predictions. He has set himself up as the poster child for climate change.
Wow.
There is nothing we can do to change the climate. They talk about the Paris Climate Accord. 90% of the Paris Climate Accord has nothing to do with climate. It has to do with pollution, clean air, and clean energy. All the dirty water in the rivers and all the plastic in the ocean is not going to change the climate. It's not going to happen. Climate is a long-term event. For example, the climate of Florida is warm and muggy almost every day of the year. If suddenly next week it snowed in Florida and it never snowed again, that's a weather anomaly. If it snowed every year from November to March, we had 20 inches of snow over 12 storms from November to March, and it happened for 5 years in a row, that's climate change. But a weather anomaly is not. We have hardly any hurricanes in the last 20 years. We've had about 5 of them, major ones, but compared to what we've had 50 years ago, 100 years ago, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. Gore actually screamed in February at the World Economic Conference in Davos, and this is a direct quote. He said, I'll tell you why the oceans are boiling. I didn't know the oceans were boiling. If they did, that'd be the biggest bouillabaisse in the world. He said, because the temperature is rising so fast that it's going to be 600,000 times greater than the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. That's a direct quote. And if you people want to hear it, they can go on the internet. It's listed there. I think it may be on YouTube. The bomb that dropped on Hiroshima was measured at 5 million degrees Fahrenheit, which is 3 times hotter than the core of the sun.
Wow.
That is equivalent to 36 quadrillion degrees, or 36,000 trillion degrees Fahrenheit. Let me give you an example of what that means, Susan, scientifically.
Yeah.
Steel melts at 1,600 degrees, glass at 1,300 degrees, concrete and bricks between 1,500 and 1,650 degrees, and rocks turn to magma at 1,800 degrees. Sand melts and destroyed and turns to glass at 1,700 degrees. If that were to happen, and we were just to have the temperature of one bomb that landed on Hiroshima, forget about 600,000 times that, the entire planet Earth would vaporize in less than a nanosecond. I mean, it's frightening. I mean, this man gets up and screams this stuff. It's frightening.
Absolutely.
Let's look at some of what his statements have been over the past few years. And we're going to basically, my book is based on exact science from scientists all over the world, including 23 scientists who did work for the United Nations IPCC, Interplanetary Climate Control Commission, and they all quit because the United Nations keeps changing their findings. He said millions of people are scrambling to come into America and risk their lives at the southern borders because of global warming. Soon 1 billion people will be moving around the world because of warming. Really? If the world is getting warmer, as Gore states, why would millions of people crossing the border make a difference? If it's getting warmer, it's not getting warmer here. It's only getting warmer there. It's ridiculous. Where could you go to hide? It would be like jumping from a frying pan into the fire. He then said, we have shattered heat records. The Antarctic ice melts and the ongoing devastation of drought and flooding and wildfires are hitting the world. Not according to the science, because the actual science, not the consensus science, NASA satellite photographs show that the Hubbard Glacier, the largest in North America, has grown immensely and continues to do so, that it's blocking the sea lanes. As a matter of fact, cruise ships now that used to take passengers up to see the Hubbard Glacier have to go 60 kilometers out of their way because they can't get through the pass. They have to go around and come back. That's the only way they can get there. Wow. According to James Taylor, president of the Heartland Institute, glaciers are growing in the Himalayan mountains, confounding global warming alarmists who have recently claimed that the glaciers are shrinking and that global warming is to blame. No, it's not. And he claims that, and again, Gore keeps claiming that global temperatures are rising at an alarming rate. Yes, they are, but I'll tell you which ones. Ground-based temperatures were rising because of how they're measured. Temperature monitors known as a Stevenson screen, and people can go online and look at these things, but nobody takes the time to do it. Nobody looks up the answers. Stevenson screens are being placed in areas that receive more direct sunlight and heat from other areas, which are used to report deceptive temperature monitoring. For example, on the black paved surface in Arizona State University, next to where trucks are parked, they have a temperature sensor. There's one on the grounds of UCLA next to a galvanized cell tower, right under an air conditioning vent that's blowing out hot air on it. And the best one that was set up is by the IPCC of the United Nations. It's at the end of the runway at Leonardo da Vinci Airport in Rome, where planes are taking off with their engines blowing right into the sensors. I have photographs of all of these sensors. It's amazing. Ground-based temperatures are not an indicator of atmospheric warming.
Wow.
What is an indicator is the satellite observations from NASA. They're showing that the Earth's lower troposphere temperatures, which do not reveal any overall warming. As a matter of fact, they show temperatures are actually going down and have been for the last 11 years. So how can the temperatures be rising that affect us? It's the temperatures in the atmosphere. What happens with carbon dioxide is that it gets heated in the evening. Carbon dioxide cannot heat anything. When they say carbon is causing the heating, no, carbon doesn't heat anything. The sun heats the atmosphere, of which is made up of less than 0.004% of carbon. The carbon gets heated during the day from the temperature reflecting off the earth, It rises in the evening. When the sun goes down and the carbon cools, it drops back to Earth and it feeds all the plant and vegetation. The long-range harm that would be caused by zero carbon is devastating to the planet. If we go to zero carbon, everything will die. And that's a fact.
Wow.
It's scary.
Yeah. What do you think of the current administration in the White House, and how do they promote the Green New Deal? Is it feasible, or does it have issues?
It's not feasible. It can't happen. It's impossible.
Michael, you have numerous other books, and people need to know where to find Allegory and all the other great books you have written.
Well, they give an Allegory, can read, any of your favorite booksellers, Amazon.com. By the way, just to tell you how much, what kind of nerve I might have hit, is Barnes and Noble has taken down all the reviews on my book from their website, which is really frightening. I mean, you talk about being censored. And every time my book comes up and it's reviewed, for some reason, the internet, and I think it's YouTube or Facebook, throws a little link on there to show what Al Gore's been saying over the years. It's just frightening. People don't realize that carbon dioxide is a critical gas. And if it wasn't for carbon dioxide, everything in this world would die. It encompasses, as I said, less than 0.004 of the Earth's atmosphere. And it's crucial to keeping the balance of life on Earth. I mean, it's not only critical for plants to thrive, which produce glucose within these plants, but glucose is a simple sugar with a molecular formula. And it sounds crazy, but in energy metabolism, glucose is in all organisms, and it's one of the most crucial energy sources known to man. So, I mean, it's frightening what would happen.
Now,
it's frightening.
Michael, you've won a lot of awards. Would you tell our audience about the awards that you won for your wonderful book, Allegory?
Well, right now it's up as a finalist for the Best in Science for 2022 by the Independent Generation Next Independent Book Awards, which is a Grammy of publishing. It also is up for the award for Best Cover Design. People can go on my website and they can see it, or they can go on Facebook on my page and see it, or actually on Amazon.com, and they could look it up. Allegory: How One Man's Lies, Deceit, Arrogance, and Greed has gaslighted the world. But it's frightening. People have to realize that we cannot destroy this earth by removing carbon. Carbon is the lifeblood of this world. It creates calcium carbonate that's comprised with it. With it, every animal with keratin shell would become shellless. Birds would lose their beaks, claws, and they would not survive. Deer, reindeer, antelopes, any other animals with horns, cows, steers, would be hornless. We would lose our teeth. Our bone structure would go to mush. You can't live without carbon. It's like blood and oxygen is to the human body. It's frightening.
Well, Michael, it's been a pleasure to have you on my show. And when you come out with a new book, come back again, because you are the most wonderful guest.
Well, I try, Susan. Basically, I try to tell the truth. My wife said to me, Al Gore's going to sue you. I says, I hope he does. It'll be the first time it's the first time we'll have to swear him in court, put him on the stand, and ask him the right questions. And as a matter of fact, the last chapter in my book, if you give me about 30 more seconds, the last chapter in my book was written by Dr. Richard Linsden. He's an American astrophysicist, and he was a chief scientist at MIT. He retired 2 years ago. I sent him an email. I wanted to interview him. They forwarded it to him, and I got a phone call one day at 4:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday, which meant it was midnight in Paris. And he spent an hour on the phone with me going over my book. And when he finished, I had to tell my publisher to stop the printing, because we have one more chapter to add to the book. And this is what his chapter was. It's one paragraph, and he wrote the last chapter of my book. And what he said was, what historians will definitely wonder about in future centuries is how deeply flawed logic, obscured by shrewd and unrelenting propaganda, actually enabled a coalition of powerful special interests to convince nearly everyone in the world that carbon dioxide from human industry was a dangerous planet-destroying toxin. It will be remembered as the greatest mass delusion in the history of the world, that carbon dioxide, the lifeblood of plants and all other living matter on this planet Earth, was considered for a time to be a deadly poison. That's the
Wow.
final words of my book. And
That's amazing.
and he was
Absolutely amazing.
he was the chief scientist of the IPCC and resigned from the UN because they keep changing his findings. There are 195 members of the IPCC. Not a single one of them are scientists. Their mission statement is to find scientists whose consensus is to prove that man is responsible. And every one of the 23 scientists that were on that panel resigned because the UN keeps changing their findings. I have their quotes in my book that you just can't believe it. It's frightening. I was shaking when I was reading some of these things, and when I interviewed some of these gentlemen, it was really, really nerve-wracking. And we continue to believe it. You can't talk about anything out there. You God forbid you had a conversation with somebody at the dinner table about climate on the left. I mean, it's like you're a non-believer. I'm not a climate denier. Climate changes. It's been changing for 5 million years, even longer. There's nothing we can do about it. Not a single thing.
You know more than scientists, Michael, and it's great to hear from you. People should listen to more of what you have to say because you know so much about climate change. And I want to thank you for being on my show. It's been absolutely a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Susan. I really, really appreciate it. And again, if anybody wants the book, they can go on my website, michaelsolomonbooks.com or Amazon or any of their favorite booksellers. And I appreciate you being there. You take care.
You too.
Thank you, sweetheart.
Bye now.